Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jeremy Leffler, and I work in the Policy Office at the National Science Foundation, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today to Week 2 of the NSF Virtual Grants Conference. Before we begin, we'd like to take a quick poll to find out a little bit more about you. If you're using Zoom from a desktop browser, you may not be able to access the poll, and for best results, we want you to be sure you're viewing the presentation from the Zoom application. If you attended our first week of the Grants Conference, you know that this virtual conference is taking place over 2 weeks with 2 sessions per day. The content for our webinar series is similar to what it would be for an in-person Grants Conference. All of these sessions have been pre-recorded. However, we will be taking live Q&A. And for information about the sessions and the speakers, please visit the conference website. If you have questions, please submit them using the Q&A function in Zoom. We are encouraging attendees to upvote questions. To upvote a question, navigate to the Q&A function and click on the thumbs up button. And this will bring the most popular questions to the top of the Q&A window. We are answering your questions as they come in and will continue to answer questions at the conclusion of the presentation. Please keep in mind that for a lot of these sessions, we do have quite a large audience, so we may not be able to answer all of your questions. This session is being recorded and it will be made available on our website, nsfpolicyoutreach.com, in the coming weeks, and we will send an email announcement as soon as sessions have been posted. If you have any technical difficulties during the presentation, please use the Q&A function and someone will assist you. Thank you for participating in the poll. We're happy and excited that you can join us as this marks our first NSF Virtual Grants Conference. And while we've been conducting these for a long period of time, they've now grown from small single-day events to 2-day events to now a virtual 2-week event. We hope that you enjoy the conference and all of the sessions that you choose to attend. I'm now pleased to present this session titled Promoting and Protecting the U.S. Science and Engineering Enterprise. This session will be covered by Dr. Rebecca Keiser, who is the NSF Chief of Research Security Strategy and Policy, as well as the head of the Office of International Science and Engineering.
I'm Rebecca Keiser, and I am dual-hatted at NSF. I'm the head of the Office of International Science and Engineering, and I'm the Chief of Research Security Strategy and Policy. I'm going to be talking to you today about promoting and protecting the U.S. science and engineering enterprise and what research security really means. So I wanted to start by telling you what research security is not. And it is not international collaboration. International collaboration is strongly encouraged by NSF. It's inherent in the scientific enterprise. And I have to say that about 30% of NSF proposals that NSF funds have international collaboration as part of them. I have the black holes here behind me, as you can see, and I put that up because the Nobel Prize winners in physics this year for the black hole collision, we're very proud that NSF funded them. And not only did NSF fund them, but of course, they were part of a large international team. That international team worked together. They shared information and data with one another, but they waited until they were ready to publish the data before the whole team put it out into the open. They were transparent with each other, transparent about where all their funding came from. And the collaboration was truly reciprocal. Everyone contributed intellectually to the collaboration. That's what we love to see, and that's how science works. So here we have another big image of the black hole, and again, a large international team, the Event Horizon Telescope, using facilities from all over the world. And it enables cutting-edge research. It strengthens scientific and diplomatic relations collaboration. Collaboration leverages the resources, not just funding, but also expertise and access to facilities and data. An important part of collaboration is the training of a robust science and technology workforce that is trained from the beginning to focus on global problems by working together with others around the world. And we know that international students and scholars contribute significantly to the U.S. research enterprise, and the diversity of the U.S. enterprise is essential. So that is what collaboration is. It's where there's reciprocity. It's for mutual benefit. We leverage skills and facilities and data. We exchange personnel, and we understand that there's a clear intellectual contribution of all the different parties. And of course, it creates great benefit. And this is not the same thing as the research security issues that we're addressing, which are due to, unfortunately, some governments having improper foreign government interference on the research enterprise. I have to say, a lot of our collaboration is with Chinese researchers. They're our fifth largest partner, and I'm really proud of that. We also collaborate around the world, as you can see, with Israel, Germany, France, UK, South Africa. And there are many other countries that are not on this list, but that are essential to the scientific enterprise that needs to continue. But we also need to be committed to the integrity of research. And what do we mean by that? We're talking about conflicts of interest and conflicts of commitment. We want to make sure that those don't exist so that science can be as objective and trusted as possible. Conflicts of commitment means when someone might be funded by many different entities, and the total of that funding means that they're committed to so many hours of research that when they're applying to an NSF grant, they don't have the capacity to perform the NSF research. Another type of conflict of commitment is undue overlap or duplication between the NSF proposal and other sources of funding, other grants that they are receiving. We're concerned about these when they're not disclosed. And that's why making sure that we understand all sources of current and pending support is extremely important. And I'll talk to you more about that. We also want to ensure confidentiality of the merit review process. In other words, those who submit proposals to us need to be confident that we are going to keep those proposals confidential until we fund them and until the researchers are ready then to publish the data that's involved in the research itself. We don't want others to have access to those proposals because that is information, that is knowledge, that's like gold to us and to the research community, and we want to make sure that it's protected. And in the same way, we want to make sure that pre-publication data is also protected until the researchers are ready to make it public and open. When they're ready, we want to make sure that it's widely available to the scientific community. So our goals for science and security at NSF are, of course, first and foremost, we want to maintain the vibrant scientific enterprise, and we know that that relies on collaboration, both global collaboration and domestic collaboration. We also know that science relies on the norms of transparency, openness, and reciprocal collaboration. And we want to make sure that, again, we're transparent with you and that we want the community to be transparent with each other and with us. We do have to balance this open environment with the needs of security. So to do that, we have to understand what the risks are we're talking about. You might have heard of the Jason report that NSF funded and came out at the end of 2019. And it was on these issues of research security. The Jason are a group of prominent scientists, academics, who do work for the United States government, but don't work for the United States government. So they do studies for us, but they're not employed by us. And we asked them to look at different areas of national security interest. So they did look at research security, and they found that indeed there are issues and problems that are due to some other governments who are not playing by these rules of openness and transparency. But they also said that we don't really understand the scale and the scope of what's going on here, and what the problem is. And that's why NSF is working hard to do analytics and work with the community to understand the size of the issues we're dealing with and take the appropriate action to mitigate those risks. And then, of course, we want to work with the community to share knowledge and best practices. So NSF created my position, the Chief of Research Security Strategy and Policy. I'm also known as the CRISP. And I became the CRISP in March 2020 to focus on these issues of research security. We also work very closely with others in the U.S. government. So we work with other science agencies to harmonize our requirements on disclosure and share information on research security risks that we're seeing. And we also work closely with the law enforcement and intelligence communities, and I'll talk to you more about that as well. We have worked diligently to improve transparency, and we've revised our terms and conditions for disclosure to make them more clear. The term itself has existed for disclosure of current and pending support for decades, but we want to make sure that everybody is on the same page with what we require. And so you'll see elaborated language in our newest Proposal and Awards Policies and Procedures Guide, the PAP Guide. We work very closely with the Office of Inspector General. The Office Inspector General does investigations when there are concerns about waste, fraud, and abuse. NSF as an agency, we focus on being proactive. We focus on putting policies in place to make sure that we protect the research enterprise, protect the transparency and openness of it. And if we do see any concerns or issues, we pass them to the Inspector General for their review. And we do increased research, risk assessment, and analysis. I've established an analytics capability in my office. So again, we can try to better understand the scale and scope of the issues that we're dealing with. And making sure that we have open communication paths with the community is essential. So I talk to university associations and societies all the time. I have meetings all the time. And I do want you all to know that if you have any questions or concerns that are not addressed in the Q&A session after my presentation, please do feel free to contact me. One issue that we're concerned about, and you might have read about in the news, are foreign talent recruitment programs. So some governments and their affiliates are trying to recruit great ideas and great people from the United States and from other countries. And in theory, recruitment of great minds is not an issue. Many countries do that. Everybody wants the best ideas to come to them. But the programs that we're most concerned about have contracts with concerning requirements. And these requirements compel the individuals who sign the contracts to disregard intellectual and other proprietary data and issues. And they do threaten the transparency and openness and integrity of the scientific research system. So I'll tell you more about this on the next slide. And this really is a concerning thing. I think most of us have not seen this in basic research. It's supposed to be open. What's the issue here? The issue is the contractual commitments that compel somebody to not be open and not be transparent. So an example of a concerning contract in this realm is a fully tenured U.S. professor at a U.S. university signed this contract with these actual terms in it. And they agreed that the first author and primary affiliation of the published papers will be this Chinese university with whom this contract was signed, even though this person is a full-time employee of a U.S. university. That they have to obtain research funding that equals or exceeds more than 1.4 million US dollars from outside the university. And so they're compelled to find these sources of funding. Of course, everyone in the research community is looking for funding sources, but if you're obligated to do so at a certain amount in a contract, that's concerning. That you're going to achieve a number of patents and that those patents are going to be credited to the government of China in this particular contract. And again, this is somebody who works full-time at a U.S. university. That they're going to hire at least one professor from one of these other talent programs. And the issue with this is that they're going to hire somebody based on their affiliations rather than on merit and on competition. And that they're pressured to publish a certain number of papers in the top 5 journals in that exist in their discipline. And that type of pressure compels people to do things that maybe they wouldn't think about doing otherwise. So the membership in these talent recruitment programs is not prohibited. One can receive NSF funding and be part of one of those programs. You do have to disclose, however, that you are part of the program, and you have to fully disclose the true amount of funding and time that is being committed to those programs. And we need that information to assess, again, whether there are any conflicts of commitment, whether there are any capacity overlap or duplication issues that we might be concerned about. I'm not going to spend too much time on the terms and conditions because you're going to have a lot of other sessions that are going to go into detail about this. But I do want to emphasize that we have added clarifications to the current and pending support terms and other changes in the biographical sketch requirements. To be clear, so for appointments, when those are disclosed in the biographical sketch, we're clear that they have to include both those where payment is received and where payment is not received. And that all current domestic or international professional appointments outside of the individual's proposing organization need to be disclosed. Another big clarification is that we're even more clear, this has always been the case, but we're more clear that information needs to be provided for all current and pending support, whether it's provided to the institution or directly to the individual. I did talk about the biographical sketch. And again, just to emphasize, it has to be any titled academic, professional, or institutional position, whether or not payment is received. For current and pending support, we do use this information to assess the capacity of the researcher to carry out the research, as well as assess potential overlap or duplication. NSF as a whole is only able to fund about 20% of the proposals that come into us. And that rate is even lower in many of our divisions and programs because of the large number of very high quality proposals that we receive. And it breaks our heart when we have to turn down a proposal that ranked really highly because we just don't have enough funding. So if we do make a decision to fund a proposal, and that decision is based on inaccurate or incomplete disclosure information, it just is not fair. And it might lead to other more serious issues that the Inspector General does need to look at. So we want to be as clear as possible that all information needs to be provided on current and pending support, whether or not that support is provided to the individual or to the proposing organization. It has to be current and pending support with an associated time commitment. If it is an in-kind contribution or something else that does not have a time commitment, you do not have to report it in current and pending support. We know that as we're clarifying the current and pending support disclosure language, we are going to be getting a lot of additional information provided to us, information that should have been provided at time of proposal but wasn't. And so we have a new term as of October 5th that says that awardees do have an obligation to inform NSF within 30 days of becoming aware of the failure to disclose information that should have been provided at time of disclosure. And if an organization does discover that a PI or a co-PI failed to disclose, that it is through the institution that they submit the information to NSF, and they do that through research.gov. And you can, of course, make sure that you talk with NSF, the institution can, if there are any questions about what needs to be disclosed. Because we do ask for the institution to provide us with an assessment of the impact of that new information on the NSF-funded grant, whether there are any issues related to capacity, overlap, or duplication. And when necessary, we'll work with the institution to take the appropriate action to make sure that those capacity, overlap, and duplication issues, if they do exist, are resolved. We also have a new international collaboration on large and facilities term and condition, and this applies to large facilities only. We know that many of our awardees on large facilities are entering into international collaborations, and again, we view that as a positive thing. However, there is associated risk, and so NSF is requesting awardees to submit in information about proposed international collaborations prior to them being finalized. And then that information has to be reviewed by NSF. So it's provided into the program officer with advanced written notification, as well as the Grants and Agreements Office. We review that information and we provide guidance back to the awardee, again, prior to entering into the collaboration. It's very possible that guidance can say that there's no issue whatsoever, but there might be some additional questions that we have or some additional information that we request. And so there'll be a conversation, again, to make sure that any risks are addressed and any concerns, again, about the capacity of the awardee to perform the terms of the grant, given this new international collaboration proposal, are resolved. We also do have an existing requirement, and I just want to emphasize it, that any existing collaborations with non-U.S. organizations do need to be provided to NSF by the awardee. And again, this is for large facilities only, so that we, again, understand any concerns about capacity, overlap, or risk. Okay, and so please do feel free to contact me or contact the large facilities office if you have any questions about this term and condition. We're working very closely across the government on these research security issues. And in May 2019, the National Science and Technology Council, that's part of the White House, established the Joint Committee on the Research Environment, or JCOR, to address issues related to the research environment. And these issues are rigor and integrity in research, the safe, inclusive, and equitable research environment, open research environments balanced with security. And so that is the Research Security Subcommittee that I co-chair. But we work very closely with the committee that also focuses on administrative burdens in federally funded research. So we want to make sure that we harmonize requirements across the government so that there's as little additional administrative burden as possible on institutions and researchers, while making sure that we abide by disclosure requirements so that we can address any research security related issues. So this subcommittee on research security is a substantive interface that coordinates among the agencies. So I talked to you about how we work closely with the scientific agencies as well as with law enforcement and the intelligence community, and a lot of it is through this subcommittee. It helps because it helps law enforcement and the intelligence community understand how the grant-making process works and understand the perspective of the science agencies. and we can better understand the concerns and the issues that law enforcement and the intelligence community might have. So it's been extremely helpful. Something that we're doing right now is the subcommittee is developing guidance for federal departments and agencies in research security. We're also developing best practices for universities and other research institutions. Things like best practices in risk assessment, best practices in disclosure, best practices in information sharing. We're hoping that these first two documents are available soon. I don't have an exact timeline because right now it's going through the whole coordination process, but I do hope that they're out in the near future. There was also a letter from the OSTP director, Kelvin Drogemeyer, to the U.S. research community that outlined, again, some of these concerns, but also the importance of openness and transparency. We're working together as well through the subcommittee to develop additional education and outreach materials to give tangible examples of the risks that we're talking about, give more data, and give practical tips on what someone can do about these types of issues. With the other agencies, we've been working closely with NIH and now we have a template that NSF is using. NIH has said they're going to be using it in the near future. And it's an automated template where you can submit in the current and pending support disclosures. It could be saved on the website so that it could be updated and resubmitted with an additional proposal. We're also coordinating on analytics so we can understand the data and methods to address security challenges and share information with each other while making sure we maintain privacy, which is an important aspect of what we think about all the time. And something that I'm very focused on is we need a very clear definition of research integrity with these specific examples that I mentioned in the training. And so we want to make sure we're as clear as possible and have that harmonized definition. So that's a goal of mine in the near future. I want to again emphasize to everyone that international collaboration is essential. And these research security issues that I'm talking about are certainly a concern. We do think that they're a concern for a small segment of the research community, but all of us do need to abide by these requirements of disclosure so that we can maintain this transparent and open system that we have. So I'll stop there and open it up for questions. And thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. And thank you for answering a lot of the questions. And we're also joined by Gene Feldman, who's the head of the policy office at NSF. Many of the questions, or almost all of the questions that have come in, you've both answered in the Q&A, and we actually don't, I see only one question that we have here that has gone unanswered. So I'll ask this question, but as I'm doing that, if you do have questions, please send them in so that we can pose them to both Rebecca and to Jean on this topic. The question that we have currently open is, for clarity, do non-financial research-related resources of senior personnel that do not relate to the proposed project need to be disclosed in a proposal's facilities, equipment, and other resources section?
You know, that's a really good question because we are constantly looking at this issue between financial and non-financial. And I would, as I'm sure Rebecca would, you really need to get more to the meat of what you are intending and mean by non-financial so that we could get a better sense. What we're trying to get to here is about capacity, overlap, and duplication. So are those resources, faculty members, senior personnel spending time on that project? It's like the MRI question. People are like, no, you don't put budgetary time on a budget for an instrumentation, major research instrumentation. That does not mean, however, the individual is not spending time on that project. Now, if it's a project you're submitting to NSF, that MRI proposal, you would be putting it facilities, equipment, and other resources talking about that activity. But if it's outside of that, we're trying to get to separating it from the budget totally. How much time are you spending, faculty member, on that project? That complete listing helps us to assess whether you have the capacity to carry out the research as proposed.
Okay. If I don't see any more questions, oh, here we go. Here's one that just popped in.
Oh, yeah. You're getting them fired up now, Jeremy.
Here we go. No, they're coming in here.
Yeah.
So if an international appointment that should have been included in an investigator's biographical sketch at the time of proposal, or something that should have been included in current and pending support but wasn't, how should we notify NSF of this new information? This is after a proposal has been submitted to NSF but prior to award.
Rebecca, you want to take that?
Sure. So only for current and pending. If it's after time of proposal, but prior to award. Jean, correct me if I'm wrong, but we did agree that it should still be submitted to us, right?
Well, if you consider that a significant variation from what you submitted, that would impact. Now, there is no policy requirement that states that. However, when you look at the PAP guide on something that's changed, that would impact the review of that proposal, obviously it will not hurt to make that information clear to NSF because you know it could impact your ability to participate in that project. And that's getting all about the capacity that we're trying to deal with. But at the present time, you're not seeing anything in the current and pending support section on that. But if it does, it's so significant that it impacts your ability to participate, we would want to know about that.
Right.
Okay, the next question, how do we determine what constitutes an international collaboration, considering that many of these are rather informal or non-contractual?
Sure. So collaboration, and certainly we have tons of researcher to researcher international collaborations. And if that collaboration is such that the international partner or international institution is funding the international PI and we're funding the NSF PI, then certainly it needs to be mentioned in the proposal. But it is, it's completely fine to do. Collaboration for us means true intellectual contribution to the project. It means that it's reciprocal, that we understand who is getting what as part of the collaboration, that everyone agrees to the terms that are required, of course, in the NSF grant, which is that after a certain period of time, the results of the research are made open to everyone. And that's collaboration. And as I said, we completely encourage it. Informal collaboration is fine. When it's researcher to researcher, there's no agreement that is required. We do have agreements, agency to agency agreements for international collaborations when we're coordinating the review processes with another funding agency or when we're coordinating the funding. So we're coordinating a research solicitation and we're going to be both agreeing to provide funding to a project should it be reviewed and accepted. Besides that, we don't require an agreement.
Okay,
can I go back to that one question that I just answered because I'm already hearing people going, give me a reference. You could look at chapter 3D, revisions to proposals made during the review process, and it talks specifically there about PI unavailability. And if you are, the change you are making is so significant that you're unavailable, that's where we would be pointing to from a policy perspective.
Okay. Next question is, historically, many NSF awardee institutions have not necessarily gotten involved with outside contracts of faculty. Is it now the NSF expectation that institutions should request or require these contracts of faculty?
So we do not require as an agency those contracts. We do say, I pointed to these examples of these foreign talent recruitment contracts. Those contracts are employment by another entity. So it's not an NSF requirement. However, the U.S. institution of higher education may well want to request the contract because it is having a second employer, another employer outside the university, but that's not something we require. What we do require, though, is to be fully transparent about the true amount of time and funding that is being committed through that contract to another entity outside of your home institution.
Okay, here's a question on foreign talent programs. So what is the policy for the case where one applied for a foreign talent program but declined the candidacy and did not sign a contract and didn't work a day or receive any support?
Sure, then there's no need to disclose.
There's no need. There's no support.
Right, there's no support. And so again, for NSF, we need to know all sources of current and pending support. If it's no longer pending, then we don't need to know.
Okay, and somebody is saying, just to restate, for the sponsored programs office, the implication here is that for each new award we receive, regardless of sponsor, we need to do a review of any pending NSF proposals for each awarded PI and inform NSF of the new award if they have any. Is that correct?
Okay, so let's talk about an award is made. You've submitted that wonderful proposal and you've gotten funding. Okay, so when you're talking about new support that you receive, not something that Rebecca talked about, you forgot to report it, it was a significant development. We're talking after the award is made. That information is now required to be reported as part of your annual project report. We use the research performance progress report format. And there is now a new section that allows you to identify, requires you to identify. It applies only to PIs and co-PIs. And you would, at the time, regular time of your report submission, that is when you would update NSF with that new information.
Okay, we're getting a lot of questions on current and pending support here. Some that I'll touch on a few of these here. Is researcher travel that is paid for by another domestic organization required to be included in the current and pending?
Only if it is research-related support with a time commitment, So Jean, correct me if I'm wrong, but if it's a travel reimbursement, that doesn't count, right?
Well, again, we're trying to get to that would be considered in the in-kind space.
Yeah.
But is there what kind of time commitment are you talking about in terms of an investment in you? And is it something that really is in support of or related to your research activity?
Okay, can you clarify the proper way to handle support provided directly to a student or postdoc working in the faculty member's lab? Should that be listed on the faculty member's current and pending? When should it be listed? When should it not be listed?
Okay, so let's go back to the issue here that is so fundamental that we're trying to reach. The student's time is not what we're talking about here. The postdoc's time, it is, if it's part of a faculty member's, and we have an FAQ on this that I think is pretty clear. If indeed it is mentoring that student or postdoc is part of their regular appointment that they do, they mentor students, they don't provide that. If, however, they get an in-kind support to bring in a student, you're not reporting the student's time, but the time you would be spending mentoring that student or postdoc. People have even gotten confused within our building that, you got to put the student's time on there as well. Now, it's not the student's time. It's all about capacity and getting to what it is you're doing to mentor that individual if it's outside of your regular appointment. Rebecca, would you like to add to that?
No, you stated it very well. Thanks.
Another current and pending policy question. So
we don't have any more of those, do we?
No, those just a couple. I guess I'm going to boil this question down. It's a longer question, but it's how do we ensure we're not double counting time commitments that are reported in current and pending support that they may have been previously disclosed in the facilities, equipment, and other resources section of previously submitted proposals?
Okay, so I mean, that is something. If it's in facilities, equipment, and other resources, yes, you're going to have to ensure that it is not also in current and pending support. But the bottom line is, again, we're using those sections of the proposal for two completely different things. We go back to the merit review criteria, facilities, equipment, and other resources is, do you have the necessary resources, that and the budget to help with that? Current and pending support is about capacity and time. They're used for two completely different purposes. So what if you accidentally reported them time? They're two different used for two different purposes, and it's certainly not going to negatively impact you.
Okay, a
It's
question
when you
about
don't report it that it negatively impacts you.
a question about foreign funded students or postdocs. How do you what is the reporting requirement if a student or postdoc is funded by a foreign government?
So again, this is something, if you're talking about disclosure in current and pending support, if you are provided with a foreign postdoc in your lab, the time that you would spend, as Jean said, mentoring that postdoc, right, would be the time that needs to be reported, or that graduate student. Jean, what about does it need to be reported anywhere else?
Well, let's go back also to say that if that postdoc, and potentially, and many times they are, is considered a senior personnel on that project, they would be providing their own current and pending support, and their time would be addressed as part of that submission as well. But otherwise, that, again, it's getting to, are you spending, what kind of commitment of time, and how does that impact you as an individual?
Okay. What about changes in current and pending support, which may change frequently? If you disclose estimates and then a month later propose again and the estimates change, is it understood that this is not reflecting committed effort and a variety of estimates that could be fluid?
First of all, you just committed effort has nothing to do. That's budget. Committed effort. This is about your time spending on the project. And if at the time you submitted that proposal, it was true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief, that's it. We understand that there may be changes from one proposal to another. It has to be accurate at the time you submitted it. That's what we're looking for. So it could change, in other words.
Okay, going back to some more current and pending. Actually, no. When a no-cost extension is requested, should there always be PI effort and salary available in the budget?
Well, first of all, according to 2 CFR 200, you can't extend an award with a $0. If the money isn't there, that's prohibited federal-wide, that requirement. If you're doing it as part of a no-cost extension, there is an assumption that there would be some time being reported because you would be finishing the research, writing the report, doing whatever you're doing as part of that no-cost extension period. So the expectation is that there generally is time needed by the PI or co-PI to complete the effort. And that's why they're asking for a no-cost extension.
So there's this is a question I believe you answered with regard to project reporting, but there's another question about it. So I guess we want to make this clear. And the question is, if the RPPR is being submitted more than 30 days after quote unquote new support from another source, won't NSF need to be notified before the report is due?
The answer is, and the decision was made at NSF, that you report that support as part of the annual report, and you submit it at the time the report is due. Could that change? This was our initial implementation of the RPPR. It went into effect just on October 5th. I can guarantee of this year. So I can guarantee you there will be lessons learned, and we may ultimately in the future change that based on those lessons learned. But right now we're having it reported at the time the annual project report is due.
Okay, two last questions here. Does the PI need to include visiting scholar in his or her current and pending support?
No, right? Only if, again, the visiting scholar, there is some time commitment to mentor or spend some time with that visiting scholar. Besides that, we do not need to know in current and pending.
Correct.
Okay. And the last question that we have here is goes back to your example, Jean, with major research instrumentation. If time is on the current and pending and in the facilities, in the example of MRI, is it expected to be certified? It seems that the current and pending is blending effort expected to be certified and estimates. I'm not sure that I get that.
I'm not sure
question,
that I understand. Right. Because we are separating what you're doing in your time and effort reporting system from this. Okay. Folks have to think differently. The budget, and then how much time are you devoting to this project? And a lot of times it's more. Because guess what? We have a 2-month funding policy. So we only pay up to 2 months across all NSF funded awards. So it is often in excess of that. We're trying to get to capacity. And it is not voluntary committed cost sharing or anything you put on that. It is about the capacity overlap and duplication.
Well, Rebecca, I want to thank you for your presentation, and Jean also for contributing to the Q&A. And thank you all for joining. And I hope you'll be able to attend some of the other sessions that we have going on this week. So
a plug that I will be covering some of these same things as part of the policy update. And
that's right, on Wednesday afternoon. So take a look at that. The session may be full, but you'll be able to stream it live on YouTube, and the links are on the conference website. So thank you, everyone, and be well.
Thank you.